Donald Peterson presents The True Adventures of Junior G-Men.
The Junior G-Men are on the air, speeding to your homes, ready for action.
Stand by, all Junior G-Men, stand by for thrilling details of the secret that had to be kept. Calling all Junior G-Men, stand by for report of Junior G-Man Bob Holt concerning
the secret that had to be kept.
Report number 906 in 3 parts as given by operator Bob Hope of Franklin, part 2.
Well, the other night I told you that Mr. Parker, the president of the Franklin National Bank, and a good friend of my dad's, invited us to spend a few days at his hunting lodge in Maine. While we were driving up with him, he told us a secret that he'd kept for 27 years. When he was young, he'd served 5 years in state prison for a robbery he had not committed. Some years later, a man dying in the Hudson Hospital sent for him and told Mr. Parker that he was the one who was really guilty. But before Mr. Parker could find out whether or not he had told anyone else about it, the man died. However, someone must have known about it because Mr. Parker had been the victim of blackmail for the past 5 years. Recently, the demands had become so great that he decided to ask 4 men he suspected to come up to his hunting lodge for the weekend, in hope that he might be able to find out which one of them was guilty. Well, after the day we got there, Vincent Hunter, Mr. Parker's secretary, arrived with the 4 men. Phil Shanley, Dr. Bennett, Dick Horton, and George Mason. It snowed pretty hard that night, and his dad and I were getting ready for bed.
In a way, I'm sorry I brought you along, son, and I wouldn't have if I had known about Mr. Parker's secret before we left Franklin.
Gosh, that was quite a story he told, wasn't it, Dad?
Yes, it certainly... Oh, who's there?
It's me, Parker.
Oh, come in, Parker, come in.
Hi. I'd like to stop and see if you had everything you want.
Oh, Bob and I are doing very nicely, thank you.
Oh, good. You're quite comfortable then.
Oh, quite. Say, Parker, look here. What's the matter?
Why, what do you mean?
Well, there's something on your mind. I can tell it. Now, what is it?
All right, Holt. You're right. There is something on my mind.
Well, what? What is it?
I think I've succeeded.
Well, what do you mean by that?
That's all I can say just now. I'll explain tomorrow morning.
But
If you don't mind, I'll just say good night.
All right. Good night, Parker.
Good night, Bob. Pleasant dreams.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Now, I know I'm sorry I brought you along.
Gee whiz, Mr. Parker sure did act funny, didn't he, dear?
Sure did. I wish I knew what was going on in his mind. Maybe from the way he acted, he seemed almost...
Hold!
Is that you, Parker?
Hold, come over here.
All right.
What's the matter, Parker? Good heavens, Holt. Something terrible has happened.
Well, what? What happened?
My secretary, Hunter, he's in my room.
Well, what of it?
He's murdered.
Murdered?
Yes. Dead.
Are you sure, Parker? Are you sure?
Of course I'm sure.
Have you told anyone else?
No. As soon as I discovered his body, I came right here to you.
I see. But come on, let's get back to your room and see if there's anything we can do.
All right, come along.
Want me to wait here, Dad?
Yes, son, you better. But wait a minute. On second thought you'd better come along. After all, there's a murderer loose. I don't want you out of my sight.
Okay, Dad, whatever you say.
Parker, you better get hold of Dr. Bennett. You never can tell. It's just possible that he might be able to do something.
All right, I'll call him. And what about the other? Shall I tell them too?
Yes, I suppose you might just as well. After all, they've got to know sooner or later. And you'll have to get in touch with the police, too, just as soon as we can get them.
And Mr. Parker's secretary had been murdered, all right. And after Dr. Bennett had made his examination, we all went downstairs and sat around the fire. All of the guests were there, Phil Shanley, George Mencken, Dr. Bennett, Dick Horton, Mr. Parker, and me and Dad. They just sat there in the silence for a while. And then...
Well, what are we going to do?
Well, what is there to do?
Hunter's dead.
Yes. We know that, Bennett. You don't have to remind us of that.
Now, take it easy, Stanley. After all...
Take it easy. Oh, yes, of course. That's going to help a lot, isn't it? You fellas don't seem to realize that a man's been murdered, and one of us is the murderer.
I realize that only too well, Stanley, only too well.
Why don't you call the police, then? Unless, of course, you're afraid.
What do you mean by that?
What do you think I mean? After all, Hunter's body was found in your room. We all heard you ask him to come there.
Are you insinuating that I murdered my secretary?
Now, wait a minute, gentlemen. We're not going to get anywhere till we start fighting among ourselves.
I know that, Holt, but this is really...
Now, hold it, Parker, hold it.
Stanley's right. We should get in touch with the police, and since this is your place, well, it's up to you.
All right. I'll call them right away. Excuse me,
Well, Dr. Bennett, you haven't said very much.
No, I suppose I haven't. But then, what is there to say? Besides, there's Mencken here and Horton. They haven't said much either.
No, they haven't. How about it, Mencken?
How about what?
The murder, of course.
Oh, that's shame, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a brilliant statement. A murder's been committed, and you... Oh, never mind. What do you think of all this, Horton? Do you... I might have known it. He's asleep again. Look at him. You think everything...
Oh, let him sleep, Stanley.
Yes, I suppose he might have just as well. But since he wouldn't know anything about this, at any rate, no one would ever accuse him of a murder. One look at Horton would be enough to tell anyone that he's too lazy to murder anyone.
Well, I suppose so. But look here, Stanley. If you're so anxious to solve this case, why don't you begin at the beginning?
What do you mean?
Well, isn't this whole thing a little odd? Don't you suppose Parker must have had a reason to invite us all up here?
Why, I'm afraid I don't understand, Bennett. What are you trying to say?
Well, I've never been very friendly with Parker. In fact, we've had several little arguments.
Yes, I know, but then for that matter, I'm not exactly a friend of his either.
I know, and I also know that Horton and Mencken here have always had plenty of trouble with our host.
In other words,
Henley, Mr. Holt is the only real friend of Parker's present. Do you begin to see what I mean?
Yeah, I believe I do. And you're right, it is odd. After all, why should Parker invite four men whom he doesn't like to spend the weekend with him? I wonder... Say, Holt.
Yes, Shanley?
What's this all about?
Well, I'm sorry, Shanley. I don't know what you mean.
Now, wait a minute, Holt. Anyone can... Oh, never mind. Well, what'd you find out, Parker?
I found out that the attack is snowed in, and that the police won't be able to get here until tomorrow morning at the very earliest.
Does that mean that we've got to stay here, locked up in this place with a murderer?
I'm afraid it does, Sonny. I'm afraid it does.
Look here, Parker. There's something behind all this. There's some reason for all...
What are they shouting for?
So you finally decided to wake up, Horton. Well, that's very considerate of you, then.
Stop it. You're wearing me. Did you find the murderer yet?
No, but I'm...
I didn't think you would, but someone, as long as we're snowed in, we might...
Oh, so you know about that, Horton? You were awake before you opened your eyes, weren't you?
What? Oh, come on. Let's go to our rooms before anything else happens. Besides, I'm tired and I'm going to catch the little man.
After all the guests had gone back to their rooms, Mr. Parker stopped in to talk with Dad for a few minutes. A short time later, he seemed pretty worried.
Well, this is certainly one fine mess, isn't it, Holt?
Well, it's not very pleasant, I'll admit that. But by the way, Parker, have you locked your room?
No, I haven't, but I'll take care of it as soon as I leave you.
Oh, you'd better. After all, the police will probably want to see Hunter exactly as he was found.
Yes, of course, and I suppose they'll ask a lot of questions.
I suppose they will. And if I'm not mistaken, it's my guess that you won't be able to keep that secret of yours from them.
I've got to, Holt. I've got to. I'll stop at nothing to...
Now, take it easy, Parker. You've got to be reasonable about this. If you don't tell the police yourself, they'll find out.
I can't let them find out. Good heavens, Holt. Don't you understand what it would mean to me if they found out that I served 5 years in prison?
For a robbery that you didn't commit?
Yes, but will they believe that? After all, I can't prove my innocence. Jordan, the real criminal, is dead, and I have no way
He might have told someone else before he died. At any rate, someone knows about it.
Yes, for blackmail. But who is he?
I have an idea he's the man who murdered Mr. Hunter.
Why should he murder Hunter? Why should
That's
he do
what we've got to find out.
You know, Parker, I believe Bob's right. There's probably some sort of connection between the blackmailer and Hunter.
Well, that's possible, of course.
Look,
I
Mr.
don't-
Parker, you told Dad and me that there was only two ways the blackmailer could have possibly gotten the information about about those 5 years you spent in prison.
That's right. He either got it from Jordan before he died in the Hudson Hospital, or from my own files.
And if the information were gotten from your files, the blackmailer could have been your secretary, Mr. Hunter.
Exactly. In fact, I thought it was Hunter. That's why earlier tonight I told you that I thought I'd succeeded. You see, Hunter wasn't acting at all like himself. He seemed all upset and nervous, and I thought it was only a question of time before he'd make the slip I was waiting for. Now that he's been murdered, I don't know what to think.
Gosh, I don't blame you, Mr. Parker. Sure is a mystery, all right.
It certainly is, and I...
Well, after Mr. Parker left, Dad and I got ready for bed. But we, neither of us, felt very much like sleeping. So we just sat and talked for a while. It was getting pretty late.
Oh, I don't know, son. The more I think about it, the more mixed up it becomes.
Yeah, I know, Dad. It's just how I feel, and yet I'm almost sure that there's a pretty simple solution to the whole thing. If we could only put all the pieces together.
Yes, but I'm afraid there are just a few too many pieces. After all, we start out with a blackmailing case and end up with a murder.
And the one that could have been committed by any one of 5 persons.
5? Oh, then you're including Mr. Parker on your list of suspects?
Oh, gosh, yes, Dad.
But surely, son, you don't...
But don't you see, Dad? Suppose Mr. Hunter was actually the blackmailer, and suppose Mr. Parker knew that he was. Isn't it just possible that...
Bob, Why,
listen, Dad, it means a lot to Mr. Parker to keep that secret, and you heard him say that he'd stop at nothing.
I know, son, I know. But good heavens, Parker is...
Oh, don't get me wrong, Dad. I'm not saying Mr. Parker actually did it, but he is a suspect. Just like all the rest of them.
Well, I suppose you're right about that, and yet
You know, Dad, the more I think about it, the surer I am that Hunter was connected with the blackmailer. It's possible that he knew who the real blackmailer was,
and threatened to tell Mr. Parker, is that it?
Yes, that's it. Now, what was that?
It sounded like a shot.
Gosh, Dad, do you suppose that...
Come on, son, stick close to me. We're going to find out what this is all about.
Okay.
Now, wait till I open the door. There we are now.
Holt, come here.
What's the matter, Macon? What's happened?
It's Stanley Holt. Parker just shot him.
Stand by. All Junior G-men, stand by. Stand by for thrilling details concerning the next broadcast. Calling all Junior G-men to proceed at once to points of duty. Calling Junior G-man Bob Holt to report to Director Donald Peterson at the next meeting on this station to conclude report concerning...
That had to be kept